Absolutely. More than 200,000 women in England and Wales had abortions last year, a record high. And a poll conducted exclusively for this programme suggests the British public are becoming more supportive of abortion rights. According to the YouGov poll of more than 1,500 adults in Great Britain, 53% of people want to either keep the legal limit for a termination at 24 weeks into a pregnancy or even raise that limit. That compares to 45% of people polled 4 years ago. Abortion is still illegal in Northern Ireland unless there is a serious risk to a mother's health. Some politicians, including Jeremy Hunt, who is standing to be Tory leader, favour a lower legal limit for terminations, although he says he wouldn't seek to change the law as Prime Minister. For the next half hour or so, we're going to discuss whether abortion laws in this country are ever likely to change and what might be behind the rise in the number of women seeking them. You may find some of the issues discussed distressing. First, here's a summary of the current law on abortion. According to the NHS, an abortion is the medical process of ending a pregnancy so it doesn't result in the birth of a baby. 59% of the world's women have access to abortion laws defined roughly as liberal. But abortion is illegal for 5% of women in the world. That is 90 million people. In England and Wales last year, there were more than 200,000 abortions, the highest number ever recorded. Abortion is legal within the first 24 weeks of pregnancy in England, Wales and Scotland, so long as 2 doctors believe the baby would worsen the woman's physical or mental health. The 24-week limit broadly represents the point at which a fetus is said to become viable or able to survive outside the uterus. It is possible to have an abortion after 24 weeks if the doctors agree there is a serious threat to the woman's life or risk of a serious fetal anomaly. In Northern Ireland, abortion is illegal unless there is a serious risk to the mother's health. OK, well, let's talk about the issues with our guests in the studio. Aisling Hubert is an anti-abortion campaigner. Naomi Connor has travelled from Northern Ireland to England for an abortion 5 years ago. Dr Callum Miller is a junior surgical doctor and is anti-abortion. Claudia Craig successfully campaigned for legal home use of abortion pills after her own traumatic experience. Laura Mann had an abortion but says she regrets it. The independent MP Heidi Allen, who talked about her own abortion experience in the House of Commons. Ajmal Masroor, an imam who wants the limit reduced to 17 weeks, and Dr Caroline Gazet, an abortion surgeon. Welcome, all of you. Caroline, first of all, why do you think attitudes are liberalising in this country?
I think we realise now that a woman has a right to choose what she wants to do with her body, and we need to trust women that they know what they want to do with their body. It's their body and their lives. And I think as we go forward in the 21st century, this is the right attitude to have.
I mean, it's not a universal attitude. We look to what's happening in the United States, and their attitudes are reversing. The law is reversing.
Well, again, I think this is fundamentally wrong. I think we do need to trust women. This is chilling that in America they are reducing it and making it very restrictive. Certainly we don't want to go down that route in England. We have a parliament that is elected and we have a law that is safe, and we shouldn't be reducing the limit at all.
OK, so let's talk more about the stats then, because in our poll as well, actually 30% of those we spoke to do want the limit reduced. Let's talk about how you all see it here. The appetite for going beyond 24 weeks, first of all. Does anybody here have an appetite to see abortions available beyond 24 weeks? No. What?
Yeah, I think when it comes to abortions over 24 weeks, I think that is a decision for a woman and the medical professional that she's dealing with. And I think, you know, what is termed late-term abortions are very rare in the first instance, but those decisions should always be taken between a woman and the medical professional. So I don't think, you know, abortions over 24 weeks, you know, there's an automatic moral judgment that comes with that, when at the end of the day, it should be for a woman to decide.
And I think we have to remember that in England, over 90% of abortions are done before 13 weeks. Nice. And of those, 80% are done before 10 weeks. Yeah. We're talking about a very small minority of women who may be very vulnerable, needing this abortion, and to take that away would fundamentally be wrong.
Ajmal, you want it reduced, don't you, to 17 weeks?
The first point about the 24 weeks or plus, the concept of abortion in Islam, from our perspective, is allowed all the way if the mother's life is at risk. under all circumstances. Or there is no weak limit. That's the Islamic philosophy from the ethics that we follow. So therefore, there is an argument, if the mother's life is at risk, abortion can take place at any stage. However, designer or whimsical abortion or social reasons for abortion is very strictly guarded within Islam. So we say abortion should not take place under any circumstances. However, if it should not be beyond 17 weeks because of the concept of soul. But the unfortunate situation is in the secular world where we live, soul isn't even an entity that is discussed, but we believe in it.
That phrase that you just used, designer or whimsical abortion, what do you mean by that exactly?
So, for example, lots of social reasons could be given for abortions. A person has become pregnant and they don't want that baby, or that baby for small medical reasons, not that their life is at risk, cleft, anomalies. My son was born with a genetic condition, and we could have abortion for him.
Did you know when your wife was pregnant?
Yes, we did. And we chose not to. And if we ever have another baby, we have the risk of having the same. As far as we're concerned, we would like to preserve life, and that's our role. Taking one life, according to my faith, is like taking the lives of the entire humanity. A fetus is a life. So I have to be very, very careful not to deny that fetus its right, human rights, its own spiritual right, and right to be. So in Islam, and my ethics says, if I'm doing it whimsically, and if it's not for a medical reason that can be substantiated, I should stay away from abortion.
OK, I mean, obviously that's your view. Does anyone here want to pick up and respond to that?
We have to be very careful about the language we're using, like whimsical. You know, for me, that is anti-women. I don't know. I mean, I was an abortion seeker a number of years ago, and I have met people, women and pregnant people who have travelled for abortions. None of them are whimsical. You know, they have not taken the decision lightly, irrespective
of your experience, because you came from Northern Ireland to have an
Northern
abortion,
Ireland, where there was an
that
almost
then?
blanket ban on abortions, as explained in the piece. So I was forced to travel. I needed an abortion. I didn't want an abortion. I wasn't whimsical about that abortion. I needed to have an abortion for what you describe as social reasons, because it wasn't right for me at that point in my life. I was forced to get on a plane. I was forced to do that without the support of my doctor and the people who know me best. I was forced to pay for that abortion, and it was a very, very difficult experience. And nothing about that experience was done. You know, I didn't wake up one day and decide, oh, I want to have an abortion. It was done, you know, in terms of what was right for my life, my family, and my future. And it wasn't easy. Now, 20 women a week are still travelling from Northern Ireland in order to access abortion services and care in England, and you know, none of those women you know, find that easy to do, I would imagine.
I respect your view.
I want to get on that. Actually, I do want to bring in Heidi Allen, because that's obviously something that you've spoken about.
Yes.
I know you feel very strongly about as an MP. Abortion now legal in Ireland, and yet still not in Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom.
And it's completely disproportionate. It just stands out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the legislation. And there have been a number of court cases recently. There are a couple still going through the courts at the moment. Sarah Hewitt, an absolute champion for the women of Northern Ireland, who, in her first case, the court found that the situation of the law in Ireland, Northern Ireland, was in breach of human rights, and that one of the judges described it as an untenable position. And we have another young woman at the moment, the age of 15, in an abusive relationship, where her mother is now facing charges because she bought abortion pills for her child. It's out of step. And it cannot be right. We call ourselves the United Kingdom to have such an anomaly in Northern Ireland. You know, a poll done last year by Amnesty Northern Ireland, 65% of the people in Northern Ireland are ready to decriminalise now. It has moved on, and it's time for change.
Stormont is suspended. Nothing's going to change unless politicians here do something.
And this, dare I say it, is what the British government keep hiding behind. Oh, it's devolved, we can't touch it. But, you know, there's been no executive since January 2017. In the absence of that, you know, the government has got to act. And I know for a fact that there are a majority of cabinet ministers within the government who support this.
In a moment, we're going to watch our film with Samantha. We haven't heard from you yet, Aisling. You campaign actively against abortion. You've been outside abortion clinics. What's your perspective on all of this?
Well, we often find, even talking about public opinion on this. We've talked with so many women who have come to us, and we do show images of abortion. And when they see these images, the literal, decapitated, dismembered bodies of these innocent human beings who have been given no human rights, no rights alive, when women see these images, they say to us, oh my gosh, it has ribs, it has hands. The doctors never told me. And if they told me, I would never have done it. And even talking about
that it's a baby before they get it.
Well, if you think about it, at 3 weeks you had a heartbeat, 6 weeks brainwaves, 8 weeks you had like your unique fingerprint. Yet what we're seeing in Northern Ireland, I mean, even a poll last year, 2018, 2/3 of women in Northern Ireland do not want to see abortion imposed on them by Westminster. So actually it's taking the decision out of the hands of the Irish people. It's not doing what they want as well.
Callum, just quickly on that, because you are a medic, you're against abortion. That graphic description of what happens to a baby in abortion is obviously something that is very, very shocking. What is your view on it?
Well, I mean, I would have to agree with Aisling. I think often the kind of medical profession hides behind euphemistic terminology. And as you say, people know it's a baby, whereas often it's described as products of conception or a pregnancy or pregnancy tissue. The reality of second trimester abortion, so, you know, one of the most disputed areas between 12 and 24 weeks, roughly that period, that is how surgical abortions happen. They happen by dismembering the baby and by crushing its skull if it's too hard to be...
That's not true. As an abortion doctor myself, up to 14 weeks, and we have to remember, let's go back to this.
But hang on, what's not true?
No, so this is the thing.
He's talking about in second trimester.
After 14 weeks, it's done by a vacuum. After 14 weeks, it's done by forceps, pulling them
over
apart.
13. So let's be accurate here.
Okay, yeah.
And
so
let's
14
remember
to
that
24 weeks,
90%
it's done by dismemberment, and that is
yeah,
the
but
truth.
let's remember
just
that
to get
90%.
Okay, 90% happen before 14 weeks, but before 13.
Before 13. And 80% before 10 weeks.
So but
for an abortion that happens,
dismembered heads into women's minds is just unnecessary. I had an abortion, and I can tell you, it's like a really bad period.
How many weeks?
It was about nine or so. Yeah. And it is like a really bad period. There is no dismembered baby sitting there in the toilet. There is none of that.
Absolutely.
It is like a really, really heavy period.
And there is no heartbeat
and that's obviously the majority, but the point Callum is making is that for some who have abortions beyond 14 weeks...
Like so 10% are after 13 weeks, and 10% of 200,000 is a lot. It's 20,000 after 13 weeks.
It's not right. Okay, I mean, and it's not pleasant to talk about it either.
Yes.
But obviously, they're making the point that it isn't pleasant what actually happens at that stage. So do go back to what you were saying about.
So after 14 weeks, where it's done by dismemberment, there are still many thousands of babies who have had their lives ended in this way. Up to after 24 weeks, even, it's legal up to birth for things like Down syndrome or cleft palate, or even if there's twins. And I think when people find out actually the reality of the abortion law, the English abortion law sticks out like a sore thumb. If you look at the rest of Europe, they have radically lower abortion limits. Many of these countries don't allow abortion for things like Down syndrome or cleft palate, or because there are twins. And I think actually when we kind of inform people of the facts on abortion, most people I speak to have no idea what it involves, and they're absolutely horrified to find out what our law actually says.
Laura, you said you had an abortion at 21 weeks.
21 weeks. So I was 12 weeks when I found out I was pregnant, and I had the abortion at 21 weeks. But in hindsight, I know that I wasn't well informed in making that decision at the time. So when I came out of Mary Stopes' clinic in Brixton, the first thing that went through my mind was, where's my baby? What's happened to the body of my baby? And I kept asking myself that question. And, you know, the nurses that escorted me down to the recovery room, because I was in so much pain and I was sobbing, she said to me, you silly girl, don't you know what you've done? And that even put a shockwave through my system and made me so depressed. But I questioned months after months, nightmares and cold sweats. What happened to this baby's body?
You were 19?
Yeah, I was 19 at the time, yeah.
You said that you didn't feel well informed. You'd gone from discovering you were pregnant at 12 weeks to having the abortion at 21 weeks. Yeah. And obviously, as part of the process, you do have to get the permission of 2 doctors to perform the surgery.
Yes.
How could you not have been informed through that process? How did the process work? And I'm not saying as in it's your fault at all. I'm just saying, you know, there is a process, and you would sort of assume that it was a process through which somebody would be apprised of all the details.
Well, in my ignorance at that age, I remember just seeing one GP at King's College Hospital a doctor, my partner at the time, and I went there. And when I went into the room to discuss that I am pregnant, the first option I was given was abortion. And we stepped out of the room, we spoke for 5 minutes, went back in, and I was so afraid, so confused. I had no clue what to do. All the voices around me at the time were telling me I couldn't do it, I couldn't do it. So I felt so much pressure. I felt okay within myself to go in for the abortion, but when I left that clinic, that was the beginning of my nightmare.
Caroline, how do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry that you've had this regret, but we know 95% of women don't regret abortion.
No, but I mean the point of sort of going through something where she now just looks back, obviously endlessly, so long later, thinking, I wasn't properly informed. The system is supposed to be that people do get properly informed, that they do get full advice, and it didn't happen here.
I can't obviously answer for that because I wasn't in the consultation with you. I'm sorry you feel you weren't properly involved. And Murray Stokes, we take it very seriously in informing our patients, but you also don't want to frighten patients. I think the important thing is that we offer counselling, we give people a lot of time to think about it. You are very welcome to come back to counselling now. It's an open-ended offer from Murray Stokes for all our clients. We have a 24-hour helpline for women to ring up. So I'm sad that you've had this experience.
I'm completely healed in my process for many years of struggling and to come to terms with the abortion that I went through. Facing the images one day just outside the Department of Health was like, whoa, like, oh my goodness, this is what happened to my baby. And that was that sudden realisation and another step towards the healing process. So I just feel that why are women not informed? Why are we not properly informed? If I went in for an operation, I would get the full download of this operation that I'm to have. Why is it with abortion that it's so secret? Why don't you let us know what we are going for and what's going to happen to our babies? Why it's not a matter of scaring people, it's a matter of informing people so that I can make a proper informed decision.
I know, sorry, I just want to pause at the moment.
It was wondering how long ago
just
it was.
answer.
So I was 19, so that's about 19 years ago.
Okay.
And in my journey of healing, I've come across many women, even to date, that tell me the same thing, that are dying in secret. And because I share my story so openly, because I am healed and I'm graciously healed, they can speak up. They feel empowered to speak to me and say, look, this is what I went through. I experienced the same thing as you and I felt that I couldn't speak to anybody at the time. And what can you do to help me? So there's still women today experiencing the same thing I experienced.
I mean, just back to you, Heidi, because obviously I assume you're asking how long ago it was because you're wondering if things have changed.
Yeah, contrasting to my own experience, which was a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I had, it wasn't as late as you, and God, you're brave, just by the way. Amazing, amazing. It wasn't as late as that, but I do remember being very informed.
But was it beyond the 14 weeks?
I'm struggling to remember. From memory, I think it was around about 14 weeks. Right. I don't think it was longer than that. I was having physical seizures every day, and I couldn't control my body. So medically, there was just, it was really, really difficult. But I do remember, I can still remember the conversations with the nurses and the doctors in the clinic, with the GP. I was at King's College as well, funnily enough. At every step of the way, are you sure these are the risks? Are you thinking? I do remember having the most incredible care right the way through. So what I would be interested to know, because you're absolutely right, we have to make sure that hand-holding, that gentle knowledge, not hiding you from the facts, but making sure you are informed, that's what was sadly lacking by the sounds of things. And there are always errors made in life, but I would struggle to take your desperately poor experience as a reason so many years ago to change the law completely. I don't think that would be right.
Were you told exactly what an abortion after 14 weeks would entail?
Yes, and there was a reason when you go to hospital as opposed to going to the clinic for your tablets. It's because the procedure is more involved.
Yeah.
And it is in our booklets about dilatation and evacuation. It is a different process. I'm not sure they had those booklets then. I can't comment, but I know that my nurse in the clinic do explain to the best of their ability. And again, not everybody would want to know. We can't extrapolate from your experience that everybody wants the details.
Sorry, everybody, I know that you all want to come in, so I just want to pause just for a moment because we'll hear from Samantha. We're calling her Samantha. It's not her name Oh, yes, it's Samantha. She's 26 and had 2 abortions within the space of 9 months. She felt it wasn't the right time for her to have a baby. There were also financial considerations. She's scared she'll never have enough money now to bring up a child, and you may find her account distressing.
When Sam realised she was pregnant, she knew straight away that she wouldn't have the baby.
It was a relatively easy decision because I knew that I wouldn't be able to have a child. My partner was unemployed for a little while as well, so I was supporting both of us. I was paying both of our rent, both of our bills, and I was really financially stretched, so I was using all my savings as well. I had no money month to month spare. I knew that there was no way that I could have a child then. There was no way that I would be able to afford it.
She decided to have a surgical abortion, which means going into a clinic to have an operation under anaesthetic to remove the embryo.
If you have a medical abortion, you lose it at home by yourself. And if you have a surgical, then you leave the clinic without the pregnancy. And I wanted my hand held through a lot of it, I think.
And what about the sort of emotional toll it took on you?
I don't think I was prepared for that emotional toll. I felt like I could go back to work immediately and it'll be fine. But I think I ended up taking about a week off afterwards. I think immediately I felt really relieved, but it's still kind of those hormones are leaving your body. It's very stressful. I was still very teary, but I didn't ever feel any regret.
She says being totally open about having an abortion really helped her get through it. She told friends on social media and was overwhelmed by their support.
You don't realise that it's all these women around you that have actually had it. So a lot of people that I'd kind of had relationships and friendships with already, providing that support and providing that information was really, really helpful. And there was a lot of women who maybe couldn't be open about it for cultural reasons or religious reasons as well, and they hid it from everyone.
Sam had tried lots of different types of contraception, but suffered with side effects. So instead, she started tracking her cycle on an app. And so 7 months later, you ended up having another abortion?
Yes, I got pregnant again. That time I'd actually taken the morning after pill as well because I knew it was too close to the fertile window, but it didn't work. I felt really stupid. I felt really stupid and really ashamed because I'd had one so recently. I didn't feel like I could be as open or honest about it because I felt like I would be judged. I was still in the same kind of situation as before where I didn't have, stable income, stable job, stable home. The second time I was less certain because I felt like I didn't want to have 2 abortions in my life.
This time she chose to have a medical abortion at home and took pills instead of having an operation. But days later, when she was at work, she was horrified when she found an embryo in her menstrual cup.
I wasn't prepared. I thought it would be more like a heavy clot or like uterus lining, and it's not. And I wasn't prepared for that.
What is it like?
For me, it was like, it is like a kidney bean shape, but it's like a lump of flesh. So it's kind of, I think it's really clear that could eventually be a fetus. Seeing the embryo made me really feel like that was a pregnancy, that I could have had a child.
And how many of your friends had also had abortions?
Quite a number of them, actually. I think possibly about 17 to 20 people. Considering that my kind of generation with millennials are really struggling to even get on the housing ladder, to afford another child in a home that's not your own, and that's something that I really want to have in place before I have children. I'm definitely not going to be able to afford a home within the time frame that I'd like to have kids. It is something that I think would cause me quite a lot of anxiety if I were to get pregnant again.
She's worried she won't ever be financially able to have a baby. So it's just not affordable for you to have a child?
Not at the moment, and I don't know when it will be.
Well, that's Samantha. We've come a long way, Karen on Twitter says, since when young girls used to die in their landlady's back room. This report is simply highlighting the next generation being shoved into a corner. She's simply explaining how she felt. They used to take babies from these young women and ship them off to orphanages. What's your response to that film, Heidi Allen?
Well, it's always heartbreaking, isn't it? None of this is ever flippant or a happy topic. But what I found particularly interesting was where she went to at the end of the piece talking about money and the financial income. And there's a particular policy at the moment that the government have the two-child cap. And we are starting to see a slight increase in abortions. And I do wonder whether there's a link to that. And the biggest...
So that's, sorry, just the two-child cap, that's about benefits,
That's
obviously.
right, correct, benefits to support families who have more than 2 children. And whatever your view might be on, well, people should just learn to budget better if they can't afford them, that's the responsible thing, they shouldn't have children. Let's go back to Northern Ireland, where abortion is illegal, and that benefit cap applies there too. So what choices do the women of Northern Ireland have? Absolutely none.
But is that a reason to have an abortion under the current system, where you have to get a medical sign-off, which is all about the health of either the baby or the pregnant mother? Should doctors be signing off if somebody goes and says that's their reason?
No, I was just reflecting on the financial angle that Sam brought to the video there around finances and why that's a driver for some people potentially as to why they have an abortion.
How liberal are doctors, Caroline, when it comes to actually signing off if someone goes for an abortion? How rigorously are those sort of tests applied?
Well, I think it's very important to, again, go back to the individual woman who's sitting in front of you and trust her to know that she's making the right decision for her. So we would always make sure that she fulfilled the nature of the letter of the law, because otherwise it's a criminal offence. So we'd always ask about how they felt if they couldn't have an abortion, or what would happen. And the majority say that, you know, they wouldn't be able to emotionally cope. But again, it comes down to the fact, why is it criminalised? Why are we having to justify having an abortion? It's part of women's health care. We need to move away from this paternalistic society where 2 doctors are signing off, saying a woman can do something with her body, when we know women know what they want to do. When we need to trust women into deciding what's right for them at that time in their life.
Aisling and Ajmal, I know that you both want to respond.
But what we're seeing with this move to actually remove all legal protections for the unborn child, there's repeated attempts in Parliament to remove Section 50 and 59 of the Offences Against the Persons Act. And that person defined in law is the unborn child. That law is there giving them personhood status. Yet what actually you're attempting to do through this kind of campaigning is say, these unborn children, they shouldn't have personhood status. In fact, we should have a right to do whatever we want to them. Let's remove the protections. Do you know what? Let's not have any doctors involved. Let's sex-selective abortions. There'll be no legal requirements.
Justify
requirements.
It's not sex-selective. We would never justify that.
No, hang on.
That's
I attempted to prosecute 2 doctors who were caught on camera agreeing to do sex-selective abortions. The CPS looked into it and said, it's not in the public's best interest to even address this case. So we already know that this is happening in the UK.
There's no legislation currently being suggested.
No, absolutely not.
So there will be no legal
MPs
requirement.
did vote against a ban on sex-selective abortion a couple of years ago. They voted very explicitly against banning it.
Overall problem I'm seeing, this is the symptom of a bigger problem. The problem is to do with lifestyle, it's to do with morality, it's to do with ethics.
Okay, so this is where you said at the beginning the designer whimsical abortions.
I say this with greatest respect to women who have gone through this. I understand. I'm a marriage counsellor, so people come to me on a regular basis. People say lots of things about abortion, etc. I have to provide them support as much as I can. But as a cleric, as a person of faith, I have a duty and a responsibility to remind everyone that we're just not a physical being. We're also a spiritual being. You can't deny the existence of a human being just because you feel like it.
OK, Claudia, you campaigned for abortion pills.
I campaigned for home use of the abortion pill, yes, after my own experience. And I want to make 2 main points based on the discussions, both what Samantha's raised in the video and what you've raised yourself. And I think the importance of talking about abortion just cannot be overemphasized. And what you raised is really interesting. You said when you started speaking about your experience, the amount of your friends that came to you and said, oh my goodness, this happened to me. And I had the complete opposite experience, where I was very well informed and looked after by my doctors, and I didn't regret it afterwards. But I've also been very public about it. And my friends have come to me and said, oh my goodness, I also had an abortion. And it's what Samantha was also saying in the video that we saw. And I just think that we're not speaking about this, what women are choosing, whether they're choosing that actually they want to gather all that information, then they want to go, no, this might be something I'll regret, or they gather all that information, it's something they decide to proceed with. We're not chatting with our friends and with our colleagues about it.
The friends that came to speak to you about it, Do you know anyone that has had their opinion changed by encountering somebody like Aisling? I know that you used to stand outside the clinic in Brighton to tell people going in that it was the wrong thing.
To provide the information.
To provide
factual information.
No, I haven't. I don't consider that to
has
necessarily
ever
be
changed?
factual information, and
They're just
don't.
images.
Yeah.
Show it.
And I don't know anyone who's had their opinion changed by that. I can speak from my own personal experience that I wouldn't find that information helpful. I would find it terrible. I would find it harassment, and I would find it intimidation.
Can I just come in on that? Because I had the experience of anti-choice protesters outside a clinic, and it wasn't helpful. They told me a woman my age could get breast cancer. They also said they prayed over women, they threw holy water over women. They said to young women, you'll regret this for the rest of your life. They told women who they assumed to be the mother of the woman that they were murdering their grandchild. None of those things are factual. Those things are emotional abuse for a woman who's already in a very difficult situation. And it's not factually the case. I want to come back on your point about women in Northern Ireland who are going to have abortion imposed on them. That's not the case. Women in Northern Ireland are having abortions. What they're being doing is they're being forced to travel in order to have that abortion. They're having the law imposed on them that restricts abortion severely. What we're talking about here, and you've made the point, is choice. That's what we're talking about.
So just to let me come back on the previous statement that you made. When I'm speaking for my organisation, by the way, the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK, when we stand outside clinics, we are doing, for people like Laura, she deserved to have all the information before she went through that abortion. It was only 10 years later when she saw an image and was like, oh my gosh, that's what happened. That was a baby. BPAS tells me it's a clump of cells. It's a product of conception. It's clinical waste. And I am seeing before my eyes a head, arms, legs. In fact, everything about you was 6 weeks. You had brain waste. So she was viewing all that 10 years later. She deserved that information. It's unjust and unfair to withhold that.
The clinic that I was accessing was the Family Planning Association. So the people, and I was going in to get information about family planning, and that's what I got. At no stage was an abortion forced on me. That was my decision and my decision entirely.
Were you told about what was actually going to happen to that child?
I was given all the information that I needed.
Okay. My fear is they're making abortion very fashionable without really talking about the ethics. I'm very afraid that is going to lose. Hold on. I said it is. We're making it. Take my word very carefully.
What you mean by that? Abortion is fashionable.
I didn't say that. I said when we discuss this, we need to talk about the ethics, the life of the unborn baby, the rights of the babies as well as the parents.
Right. Incredibly careful about the language you are using.
I am very...
absolutely not, actually, because you're talking about lifestyle.
I don't want to...
Talk about flippancy and for fashion.
I don't want to argue with you like this, but I'm saying something very clear. Ethically speaking, a baby born is a baby born. An unborn baby is still a baby.
You're setting up a dichotomy of abortion. You're setting up a dichotomy of abortion.
I'm going to have to stop you.
Respect a life, then I'm afraid that's the problem.
I think whatever anyone's opinion is, it shouldn't be in criminal law, and women should not be criminalised for making choices about their own bodies.
I mean, you've all got really strongly held views, and that's why we've brought you together, and we really appreciate you all sharing your experiences and your views. Just quick final, raise your hands if you would. Does anybody want to see the law changed?
I'd like to do
You want to change in opposite directions.
Of course.
Do you think it will change? I mean, we'll ask the politician for the one on this. Do you think it's likely to?
Yes, I do.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
I think it will be decriminalised,
weeks?
and I think Northern Ireland will go through the same process and be equalised.
And I mean, obviously, if Jeremy Hunt becomes the Prime Minister,
I think it's regardless of who the Prime Minister is, actually, the swell has to come from the backbenchers, and it's there already.
We are right out of time. Thank you all very much.